Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the Dynasty Pawn Shop. Well, as always, you got Clay and Eric here, and we bumped it up a day, and I got to give props to Eric for being so flexible. I'm going to see my parents tomorrow, and I could have done this live from mom's basement or something like that, but internet's shaky. Who knows? They could have come in with the meatloaf. Something crazy could have happened. So I'm glad we can do it, hopefully in some peace and quiet. As this week, we're just going to do a quick recap of QBs, running backs, and then really the meat of it is to talk about some draft prospects since we're a week away. Eric, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm actually kind of hopeful that someone will bust into here with some meatloaf for me. So maybe you and I got different perspectives on it. But excited to be here, excited to fire it up on a Thursday. It kind of makes me feel like I'm starting the weekend a day early. So maybe I'll find a reason to call in for work tomorrow and go hit a few golf balls or something. But definitely looking forward to tonight's show. Basically, we're gonna recap the season that was in free agency and officially earmark the 1 week point to what feels like off season Christmas Day in the NFL with the draft coming up a week from tonight.
Yeah, and before we get into the uh, the draft, let's talk a little bit about some free agency fallout. And specifically, when we started this, we did it kind of like I think a couple weeks after the Super Bowl. We touched on the QBs and the running backs. Then free agency hit, and then on our wide receivers, tight ends, we were able to kind of roll everything into one with what we were learning on the go. But since we did QBs, running backs prior to free agency, a lot has happened. So some of those things have changed, and I'll do my best to keep the Fantasy Pros Dynasty rankings up, and we can, after talk about these moving pieces, kind of maybe try to slot them in a little bit based upon what we were saying before. But with the QBs, I guess there's some big news, but nothing crazy. I mean, Dak re-signed. There's going to be some stuff in the NFL draft that's really going to shake it up. But to me, the biggest one was Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitzmagic was rumored to go into retirement. All of a sudden, lo and behold, 1 year deal with the Washington Redskins. I'll let you lead this one off, Eric. What are your thoughts from recap it and then dynasty perspective? Kind of where would you slot him? It was ballpark ranking.
Yeah. So I think that is probably the best way to encapsulate the quarterback free agent market this year. Ryan Fitzpatrick is our headliner, whose name is in lights, right? So looking at it from a pure football standpoint, I actually really like the fit in Washington. You think about what some of those young and emerging skill position players have done over the last year or two with players like Dwayne Haskins or Alex Smith throwing them the ball. So, now we have someone that is a fairly accurate and well versed distributor of the football, someone who's willing to take risks and to throw the ball down the field and into tight windows. So I do think overall it's a plus. It's an upgrade for those offensive weapons there in Washington. From a dynasty perspective, I mean, this is fantasy mirroring reality. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the epitome of a bridge quarterback. If you have a couple of young guys that you're maybe waiting for them to take the job, Jordan Love, for example. If you have some early picks in your dynasty rookie draft, and you're thinking about picking up some of the QBs coming out, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a great way to fill that gap. In terms of where he slots in, he's kind of in that middle class, kind of the 15 to 25 range. He'll have a few weeks where he'll peak up and get a little bit closer to QB1, but pretty firmly in that kind of mid to back end of the QB2 range for me.
Yeah, and I think obviously you're basically getting them for 1 year, and you know that. So to me, I have him a little bit lower, but I agree with you. I like his skill position players. I think everywhere he's gone, he's put up some good numbers. He's never done well from a win-loss perspective, but he's always putting up pretty good fantasy stats. I think Fantasy Pros has him ranked 42. You said 15 to 25, but you were talking about like on a weekly. They're thinking Dynasty. You're thinking like a week-to-week basis. I would think Dynasty. I have him a little bit higher than 42, but not much. I think maybe. Let me see when this was updated. It had to have been updated, but yeah. So it was updated on April 20th. So I think this kind of bakes in my biggest fear, um, is that at 20 in the draft, they could get a quarterback. I've heard rumors they could trade up. They might get someone in the second round. I just think if they have to spend that draft capital on the replacement if they don't believe in Taylor Heineke. And it sounds like they don't. And so if they draft someone that high, to me, the fan base, you don't get to sit and wait anymore. Fitzpatrick throws a lot of interceptions. Long story short, I think if you're drafting before the NFL draft next week, you're gambling. I don't know if Fitzpatrick makes it all 17 games now. So that's where I would have him a little bit lower. But as long as he's under center, I think he's serviceable. Just know you get him for a year.
Yeah, that's really the thing for me, right? Like, Ryan Fitzpatrick is destined to be babysitting a rookie quarterback. That is just the tale of his career over the last few years. So I do think, whether it's in the first round or whether it is later in the draft, that Washington will be looking to acquire that quarterback of the future. For me, a lot of it is more so to do with the value in having a known quantity there, and b, just kind of those unwashed masses after about QB 12 or 14. There's a lot of guys that start to look really the same. So it's one of those interesting spots where you're trading off the long term. He's very much so an immediate and short term asset, but for someone that can contribute in an average to above average way week in and week out. So he fits in a really weird spot in the dynasty ranks for me.
I hear you there. And we'll go through some of these quickly. I put this up here. Andy Dalton to the Bears, I think for a year. Dear God. They obviously also have Nick Foles, and they might be competing. I don't really care. Dynasty perspective, just stay away. Pass. I'm on to the next one. Eric, anything else?
Yeah, pretty similar view for me, right? I think it's fair to talk about him after Ryan Fitzpatrick because I do think that his window of time is arguably shorter than one season in Chicago. He likely will be competing with Foles and or QBX. So his outlook in terms of dynasty is about as low as it gets for me.
Let's go to Sam Darnold then. And we touched upon this a little bit on our last episode. He got traded to the Panthers. Bridgewater's still there, but I'm pretty sure Darnold's going to be starting. The narrative I'm hearing, I'll just see if you agree or disagree, Eric. The narrative is it's all true. He's never had a consistent offensive coordinator. He's never had smart coaching staff. He's never had skill position players or running game. All that's true, but I mean, he's had 3 years, so everyone's kind of giving him one more chance to keep saying, "Oh yeah, Sam Darnold, this is it." I'm not so sure on that. Eric, are you buying that hype with those narratives on why he could take a fourth year leap, or are you more hesitant like I am?
Yeah, I'm probably somewhere in between, right? It would really depend on how we define a leap, right? He has been outright unusable through his career thus far in the NFL. So do I think that he could potentially play himself into bye week replacement status or back end QB2? Yeah, I think he theoretically could. Do I think that he's going to burst onto the QB1 scene? Probably not, right? The things that Sam Darnold has working in his favor, everyone is constantly reminding us of how young he is. But this is hands down the best offensive minds and developers that he's had in his young career, and arguably the best set of weapons around him. So I do think he has a lot of things working in his favor, and there's reason to be optimistic for how this year will play out for him. But that has to be kept in the relative sense of just how piss poor his career has been thus far.
Let's jump to Jameis versus Taysom. Quick hits. I think I think they do some sort of gadget and renders both of them useless. I think Jameis will try to be the QB, but Taysom will have enough packages to siphon off the touchdowns or his own drives. So I'm not buying either of these. Eric.
Yeah, I've got a similar view. I think all told, Jameis Winston will be the starter there, and he will see the lion's share of the snaps in New Orleans. But I do imagine that Taysom Hill's role will expand from his weird gadgety third down red zone capacity that we've seen thus far. Right? If that was previously accounting for 5% of quarterback snaps, I could see that expanding to 10 to 15%. Um, Winston does have some upside, but it's going to be one of those spots where it'll be hard to stomach as a fantasy owner, just watching those key high conversion opportunities go to a guy that's trotting in off the bench, right? So I'll be avoiding the situation overall. But I do think Winston ends up with the overwhelming majority of the reps and the snaps at the spot.
And the last thing I have here is Cam back with the Patriots, which is just a shock to me. And I don't know if we touched on it before, but I mean, it's a 1-year deal. I'm just baffled. I'm not sold he will get, like Fitzpatrick, I'm not sold he'll get all 17 games. I got to remember that it's 17 games this year. So it's not a 16 games. But yeah, it's just, everything bad that happened last year from the standpoint, no wide receivers, just no off-season reps. I'm still just not buying it. Plus, there's this. I think the Patriots know like this is just a band-aid. They're probably going to either trade up or pray that their QB falls to them at 15 where they are right now. Long story short. Cam back with the Patriots. That's I don't think anyone should have been hyped, but just with the draft coming up, I'm not optimistic he will have that for very long.
No offensive weapons in New England. Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne would like a word, sir.
Wasted money. Wasted money.
I think New England surprised just about everyone with almost everything they did this offseason. The Cam signing from a football perspective, I think is a heady play, right? He's a known quantity. He's someone that largely prior to coming down with COVID was performing in reasonable fashion in the offense that they drew up for him there. So I do know that the New England organization puts a priority and an emphasis on consistency, and I think that is largely what they were hoping for in re-signing him. Given the way that the contract is structured, it is essentially another prove it deal. So, it's reasonable to wonder whether or not they're going to look to draft their quarterback of the future here a week from today. But as long as Cam can perform kind of like the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season that we saw last year, I think he's got a pretty good shot at maintaining that job for at least the majority, if not the entirety of the season. But the likelihood that he's there long term has to be considered, somewhat slight at this point.
And just a little teaser for later, some of the QB's ideal landing spots, at least myself personally, are probably going to have one with the Patriots and another one with the Redskins. So if you can hold on for 10 minutes, we can fill those gaps. But Eric, did I miss any other QB news notes from the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, some of the at least the splashiest move in the QB market was between the Rams and the Lions, right? Um,
I couldn't
uh,
remember if that happened before or after our pod, but yeah.
yeah, it was well before our pod. They
Mm.
they they got out there and essentially got this done. I think within like a week of the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
So they'd
that's right.
clearly been tampering in that non-tampering window. But I mean that's obviously the biggest splash in the QB market. I think it sets up for a pretty interesting year for specifically the Rams offense.
All right, yeah, let's jump to the running backs then. The first one, I wasn't high on where Kenyon Drake would go, but I would not have guessed in a million years that it would have been to the Las Vegas Raiders. And it doesn't so much affect my outlook on Kenyon Drake than it does Josh Jacobs going into his third year. Been really impressive for the first two. Now all of a sudden, what the heck? The signing, I mean, it just screams boneheadedness from a front office that's kind of demonstrated that since they've got in power in the last 3 years. They're trying to say they will line them up in the backfield together. They will split Drake out. I'm just not buying this, and I'll pull up the running back slots where they have them ranked. Drake's a non-factor for me, and then Jacobs, he's down at 18. I wish I had it where he kind of was before it, and I think I was actually higher on him than some of the rookie or second-year backs when we did this show, probably about a month or 6 weeks ago. Now I think that's fair. I might even bump him down a couple more spots, but to me, this news just drastically affects Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think it affects both Jacobs and Drake, and unfortunately, it moves them in the wrong direction, right? You rewind a year ago, and there were no shortage of Kenyon Drake is RB1 truthers out there, and for periods of time, he got a workload that would at least call to that sort of consideration. Now they're in Las Vegas. There isn't really a path to him seeing at least anywhere near even half of the workload. And on the Jacob side of the coin, I don't think it really damages his picture as significantly as Drake's, right? I think Kenyon Drake takes the bigger hit with this move. Really, in my mind, it's much more about limiting his upside, right? If you think about Josh Jacobs and his young career, that there's always been that question of, man, he is the between the tackles, between the 20s rusher. He's getting that sort of workhorse workload, except for his receptions out of the backfield. And every year we're wondering, is this a year where we see him take that step forward and start getting more passes coming to him out of the backfield? And obviously, with Kenyon Drake in town, I read this to mean that the Raiders are really looking at Josh Jacobs as that between the tackles, first and second down ball carrier, which he's been very effective at. But that upside is effectively gone now that Kenyon Drake is in town.
Yeah, and the other ones here, we can probably make these some quick hits. Chris Carson's re-signing with the Seahawks. Eric, I'll let you lead off. What do you think?
Yes, surprisingly, despite how late he signed, he is the second highest contract given to a running back there this offseason. So very much so. It indicates a lot of more of the same. I know that Seattle has DJ Dallas sort of sitting and waiting. We saw him in short snippets last season, and he wasn't overly impressive. So I would expect to see that same kind of 3 to randomly 5-headed monster out of the Seattle backfield. So not really moving the needle a ton for me with Chris Carson re-signing there with the Seahawks.
To me, at least, I mean, you just got to ride Chris Carson until those wheels fall off. From an NFL perspective and Dynasty, he's 26 years old. I had to look that up. I cheated. I thought he was actually maybe a year or two older, but he's falling right off that. He's right at that cliff where the production starts to go down. We know that the Seahawks like to employ a running back by committee. The 2-year deal just kind of shows how teams value running backs. He might get, if he plays decent these next years, he might be kind of like a Mark Ingram exception to the rule and get a couple extra years out of this. So I'm actually willing to get him. He's ranked 22 at this time. It's a risk, but because I do think they could draft someone again. I don't think they're sold on DJ Dallas. If they have DJ waiting in the wings, then I think Chris is okay for a couple of years. But I think he can be a lower end RB2, and in Dynasty, I think people are going to be looking to jettison him. So if you can stomach the risk, maybe you take him on as some depth, because I do think you can have him a little bit cheaper than some people expect. But the draft could change that next week. Let's go to Jamal Williams. He signed with the Lions. I was excited for Jamal Williams before this signing. he signs with the Lions. Obviously, they have Swift. They have a new coach, but I'm sure he'll do a committee too. Dan Campbell. Um, unless Swift get injured, I think it just kind of puts Jamal in the boat we had him with in Green Bay, just to a little lesser extent because Aaron Jones is more skilled than Swift. But I think he's playing an important piece on that team, but second fiddle from a fantasy football perspective, which just makes him a high-end handcuff in Dynasty.
Yeah, that's the read for me too. And specifically Jamal Williams is why we just can't have nice things in fantasy football. I was very excited to see him get out from that Green Bay situation and into more of a lead back type of role. And of course, he goes to Detroit, where I was hopeful to see DeAndre Swift emerge even more in his sophomore year. So now the likelihood of either of those happening is obviously lessened significantly. I think that it leaves Jamal Williams as an avoid overall, right? He is a high end handcuff, and you'll probably have to pay a little bit more for him than you're likely to get as a return with his on field production, and it obviously limits some of Swift's upside, being that there will be at least some of that workload distributed to Williams this year.
We had a question come in from the chat from Gerson asking, "Are we worried about Goff and that offensive line hurting Swiss value?" I'm more worried about that O line. The Rams had Goff and Gurley when he was producing, was catching a lot of balls. So I'm worried about Swift from the lack of talent around him, especially like you said, O line, but also the wide receivers. They don't have anybody. That's going to make Goff look worse. It could be very easy just to stuff the box, or just put someone really fast on Swift to eye him and kind of take him out of game. So that would be my concern there. Just a couple quick ones here. Mike Davis, Eric, do you think he holds on to the job this year?
Probably not. We'll touch on this as we get a little bit further into the draft preview, but I could see probably in the second round or later Atlanta picking up another running back this year and us ending up into another committee situation. Should he manage to get through the draft without another teammate entering the running back room, I do think that Mike Davis actually offers some pretty sneaky value, but the likelihood of that happening is fairly low in my mind.
And then the last thing I had on here was just everyone's going to Houston. I mean, Mark Ingram, Philip Lindsay, they had David Johnson. So just to me, I don't know what to do here. I don't think anyone's really trying to worry about it. Maybe you take Philip Lindsay as a flyer and hope the old men hurt themselves at some point, and then he can show what the young legs can do. Eric, did I miss any other running back news we should touch upon before we get to the draft?
Man, I think that is that just about does it, right? It was a fairly firework free agency for the position. But why those players decided to go to Houston will baffle me. Will forever baffle me. But I think with an injury cropping up, maybe Lindsey has some value, but there are just too many mouths in Houston to really consider them assets in the dynasty game.
All right. So this time next week, this is our last show really before the world of NFL just gets turned on its head with all these draftees, where they're going. All of a sudden these running backs are in great positions. Wide receivers have competition. Maybe the Lions draft that O-line that we need to be high on Swift. Who knows what's going to happen? But before we get into the dynasty perspective, Eric, what are you excited to see coming from the draft?
Yeah, I think there are really two things that I'm going to be watching for on next Thursday. The first, we've talked about it a lot over these first four episodes. Teams in the NFL are very much so realizing that getting a competent quarterback on a rookie contract is the cheat code in this league. So the first thing I'm looking for is just how quickly we see five quarterbacks rush off the board. Um, I'll say I'm not a betting man, but everyone who's listening and has listened knows that I am. I wouldn't be surprised if we see all five of them off the board in the first 10 picks, which will be a pretty monumental day in draft history.
Man, I
The
think
other
you'd
thing
have
that I'm
to.
looking
Yeah.
for is actually on sort of the descending side of the asset valuation, right? If there's all of this climbing and excitement and attention around rookie quarterbacks, the other side of that scale for me is the rookie running back, and I legitimately think that we might have seen last year with Clyde Edwards-Helaire the last first round rookie running back, at least until we see pretty significant changes in the CBA. So those are the two major themes that I'm looking for heading into next Thursday.
And I mean, to me, it's just, I think the draft is just, taking on this spectacle that in the NFL offseason, if you're tuning in now, or you're like Eric and I, you just love NFL, so you don't care that it's 3 days and they just drag it out, but I just eat it up. So it's kind of like the, Christmas and spring before we get into it. We're about to get into the NBA playoffs. Baseball's underway, but this is kind of really exciting from that standpoint. So just starting Thursday night, then it milks all of Friday night, and then it's just the news all the weekend. So that's always just why I'm very excited for this. And one thing I wanted to touch upon, you kind of hinted at it here a second ago, but I wanted to ask you what pick is it? When is the draft just gonna just turn on its head? Just all of a sudden you're gonna say, where'd this come from? We've done a million mock drafts. We know that three QBs are going 1, 2, 3. Maybe they go 4 and 5, or if defensive people go 4 and 5. I mean, something wacky is gonna happen. And as an example, I I actually think we're gonna get QBs 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't know if it will be the Falcons or they actually trade, but I think they're going to capitalize on that or just take the QB. The Bengals are at 5. They're clearly not taking a QB. So they can either hold a king's ransom, or the next pick, why you've heard probably the news leak this week, is the Dolphins are fielding calls to trade back down. I think we're going to see a scenario where they're all out. All those 5 QBs are out, maybe in the top 6, because someone's going to trade up to 6 because they have to get that guy. Maybe even to 5. It could be crazy, but I think it really it could turn at pick 4 if it kind of follows the general consensus that it's Kyle Pitts or something like that. Then it's business as usual, and then there might be risk that not all 5 get through. But Eric, what pick do you see that might just cause chaos?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. On the whole, right? They like to say that this is lying season in the NFL. So there are all these whispers, all these stories that are, either getting out there, intentionally being leaked. So really the full range of outcomes that are in play starting next Thursday. The thing that I still can't wrap my head around is why San Francisco gave up so much capital to presumably go draft Mac Jones. That still has me on my head from when they made that trade, however many weeks ago. So maybe they've pulled the wool over my eyes and they're looking at a different player there at 3. But once I presumably hear his name called when San Francisco is on the clock, I'll still continue to be dumbfounded that they felt they had to give up that type of a haul in order to get what looks to be, at least by my book, a fairly average quarterback at the NFL level.
And before we jump into our draft prospects, I totally missed it. I was trying to keep us on pace, and I completely forgot to talk about our sponsor. We were going to do it as the segue between the free agency and NFL draft. So, Eric, let me turn it over to you to talk a little bit about Manscaped.
Yeah, our friends over at Manscaped, they are making sure that you are always game day ready below the belt. So Manscaped is the full line of men's grooming products. They have all of the oils, all of the tinctures, all of the deodorants and the toners that you need to make sure that you're staying fresh down there. But more importantly, and their primo product is the Lawnmower 3. It's a waterproof, guide light enabled trimmer that helps you spare yourself from nicks, cuts, snags, and honestly is the best grooming device out there on the market. So Manscaped has been working with all of the outlets here on the Going for Two network, and because of that, we actually have a special promotional offer. If you head over to manscaped.com and you enter our promo code, which is Pawn Shop, you'll get 20% off of your first order, as well as free shipping. And as always, your balls will thank you.
Awesome. And I didn't just walk out in on your pitch there. I just had to go get water. People can probably see me coughing while I'm on mute. I was just trying to spare everyone there. So
He's
let's
lying.
jump.
He stepped off the screen and did a little manscaping himself.
There you go. Yeah, I was testing the product. That toner, it's a lifesaver. But so let's go through the positions, kind of talk about the top prospects. We don't have all night, so we're not going to go through every single one. There's probably some great podcasts and live streams out there that are doing that. We'll touch on the maybe top 4 or 5 depending on position, and we'll try to really focus on their ideal landing spot from a dynasty perspective, and I'll try to keep it as realistic as possible. So I'm not going to put everyone on not put on everyone on the Kansas City Chiefs, or say Trevor Lawrence's ideal landing spot is anywhere but Jacksonville or anything like that. But we don't really have to talk, like I said, we don't have to talk about ideal landing spot for Trevor Lawrence because we know where he's going. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. And of course, I had it up just a second ago. He's ranked, and it seems to be off because this has him ranked 27 on Dynasty rankings on Fantasy Pros, but it also says his average is QB 12, which I'm more in line with because I would obviously draft him. And I think we talked about in the first one, if you want him, you're going to have to draft him top 12, which means ahead of Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Tannehill, Jalen Hurts, Baker. Yeah, I would. I don't think I could do him over Joe Burrow, maybe over Watson, just because of the legal trouble. Jeff was just joking about it. The best massage parlors are in Houston, apparently. I don't think I could draft him over Russell Wilson, but yeah, maybe 8. Maybe that's. I mean, I think you're gonna have to go higher to get Lawrence, but 8 seems reasonable.
Yeah, actually, speak of the devil himself. We did a startup dynasty. Actually, the week that the regular season ended, and Jeff picked up the rights to the first overall rookie pick. I think it was in the 9 spot. So that sounds about right. I would imagine actually now that we're a bit closer to the draft itself, that you might have to go a little bit higher in order to get sunshine onto your team, because the rookie hype heading into the draft is a real thing, right?
And these aren't my rankings or Eric's rankings, and where this order we do it in. So because the next one I have Zach Wilson, and I only put him second because he doesn't have an ideal landing spot. He's going to the Jets. If they shock us, whatever. But I'm willing to gamble here, and we'll just talk. He's going to the Jets, and to me, he on Fantasy Pros he's ranked 34. I would obviously rather have him. I guess average. He's 21. These numbers are throwing me off. But if he's at 21, you're getting him over a Tom Brady, a Sam Darnold, Jameis, Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously. So you're basically right around Derek Carr, Jared Goff. I think that's worth the risk. I'm not in love with the Jets from offensive line, running back. They got Davis from Tennessee. I'm just not sold. Now they could obviously upgrade pretty quick, but to me, I think he carries the most risk from a dynasty perspective of busting and not being there. So, Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got my concerns about Zach Wilson as well. Less to do with the circumstance that he's walking into, right? Just kind of the nature of where rookie quarterbacks are taken today. You can make an argument that all of them are walking into pretty shaky situations. In terms of what that coaching staff has done, and what Rob Saleh has assembled around him, I'm actually a bit more bullish on the Jets overall. My concerns with Zach Wilson are more from the angle of just how many sort of 1 year wonders we've seen get drafted early and not really pan out. I would like to see a bigger book, a bigger tape, or a longer tape on him, and see him do it more consistently at this level. So, I think he'll be viable. I think it's fair to consider him right in that range that he's ranked on Fantasy Pros. But I'm a little hesitant without a larger sample size to look back to in his college career.
I guess one thing going for him is he's pretty much guaranteed to start from day
We'll walk
one.
right in, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. He's thrown into the fire. Next one I have on here, Justin Fields, and I'll throw it over to you, Eric. But do you think his ideal landing spot is San Francisco at 3? Or like you alluded to earlier, they go with Mac Jones. So then, therefore, Fields can go somewhere else. And if it's somewhere else, do you think it would be a better fit than San Fran?
Yeah, so I would love to see Fields taken there in San Francisco. I think about what we've seen from him in terms of an arm strength standpoint, in terms of his ability to move around the pocket and to create some throwing lanes, specifically in the context of the offensive weapons they have in San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan's offensive mind. So I would absolutely love to see him land there. It's just all the reports and indications out there are saying that it's not likely to be the case. And if so, if that is the case, I think what is most likely to happen is we'll see someone move into the 4 spot, maybe a Denver, maybe a Minnesota, someone that is really looking for that rock solid answer at the quarterback position. From my perspective, he's the number 2 prospect at the position coming out this year. So I think if he slips past that 3rd spot, which is looking likely, then you're going to see a lot of teams really, really itchy to get up to 4 or 5 and try to add them to his roster.
Yeah, I guess San Fran might be the best case scenario. I know some people would then be nervous. Oh, well, then Jimmy G starts for a little bit, but no, Fields is going to get on there sooner rather than later. I wouldn't even hesitate or play the mind games that okay, he might not be starting. I have him as my second best QB, rookie QB. Fantasy Pros, he says you have to be taking him as the QB 16, kind of to have a shot, which is right after Stafford, before Wentz, Matt Ryan. I mean, you'd probably have to reach up higher to get him if you want him. I don't think you're gonna be able. Some people take him over Tua, Baker, Jalen. I mean, he might have to be top 12 to get up there. And San Francisco, I think, is the ideal landing spot. And if it's not there, then I mean, like you said, any team can trade up. We'll talk about some other teams here, so I won't spin our wheels just talking about it because I do think almost anywhere he went would be ideal. And San Francisco just has all the weapons, so I'm not really worried if he doesn't start. Oh yeah, your boy Mac Jones. So heavily rumored to be at 3. Um, if not there, oh, I don't even know. I'm not high on Mac Jones, but I guess an ideal landing spot to me, maybe the Denver Broncos. Yeah, because I mean they have some decent skill position. Um, Kind of a similar system in the sense. I mean, I think he and Locke have the same ish skill set, not really too mobile. I would think maybe that would be a good spot for him. I'm trying to think. Eric, are there any other spots you would maybe prefer over Denver for Mac if he got past San Fran?
Yeah, the tricky thing with Mac Jones in specific is if he were to slide past San Francisco, I think he's probably the most likely of the big 5 to slip down a good ways down the board. This could be a spot where Carolina, we talked about last time out, maybe grabs him and has an open competition or has him sit behind Sam Darnold for a year. Honestly, Denver is going to look like a great spot for any rookie quarterback, just given all of the weapons they have in that passing offense. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because I feel like in Drew Lock, they have a lot of what they would be getting in Mac Jones. He's a bit more accurate, but apart from that, they compare very similarly. So I wouldn't see them spending a top 10 pick on a player that evaluates to be like to the one that they already have. So as you continue to work your way down the list, it really does pose the question of where he might fall to if he makes it past three. Right, I think it's fair to wonder if he'll slide all the way down to the New England Patriots, where apart from San Francisco, seem to be the most widely rumored landing spot for him. Um, so if that's the case, I do think that he would fit in fairly well. I think that of all of the teams in the league, I would have a lot of confidence in Bill Belichick to design an offense and to develop him to a point where he can get the absolute most out of him. So practically speaking, I really do think that it's New England all the way down at 15 if we see Mac Jones make it past three.
And Mac, they have slotted right kind of at spot 29, which would pair him right with Drew Lock, behind like a Cam Newton, Jimmy G, Taysom Jameis, Sam, Tom Brady at 22, Derek Carr. I mean, if you want them, this is where I'm not high on Mac Jones, but if I had a pick in the rookie QB and he was the only one left, I wouldn't sweat it too much from the standpoint. There's 5 QBs going in the first round, unless it's just a historic class. Maybe 3 pan out to be serviceable. And besides Trevor Lawrence, it's going to be tough to guess, really. So if he fell to me, he's my 5th favorite. But if he fell to me, I would take him. The last one here I have from that top 5 is Trey Lance, and ideal landing spot. Eric, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, so we touched on him earlier. I think that Lance ends up in Denver, not only as the ideal spot, but also a logical landing place, right? We think about how he profiles as this big arm quarterback who's got a hose. He can throw from any arm angle. He can make plays on the fly. He really does profile as the sort of development project that we've seen a lot of NFL front offices put a premium on, right? This is how Jordan Love ended up as a Packer. This is how Josh Allen ended up as a Bill, right? So his floor is markedly lower than any of the other in this top 5. But with his just raw skill set, I think that his ceiling is arguably as high as any of them. And I think that John Elway is going to be sitting up there in the front office and see another sparkly new toy that he can potentially go play with and develop in Trey Lance. So I'll pencil him in at the 9 spot with Denver.
Well, Kyle seems to agree with you, Eric. And what I was thinking of, and only from a developmental standpoint for the team as well, but I was thinking maybe the New England Patriots. Like Kyle mentioned, he won't be a week 1 starter, but Trey has similar skills to Cam Newton. Everyone's trying to say Josh McDaniels can, tailor his offense to the specific QB. He did okay with Cam last year, but I mean, it was such a struggle from a passing game perspective. I don't think we really got a chance to see it. But if he really can do it, it's a good spot for Trey Lance to sit behind, learn, and really be able to come in maybe mid-season or earlier. But I don't think it's a good spot for a Mac Jones unless you're just going to throw Mac Jones in at the week 1, because you don't want to have a whole offensive playbook for Cam Newton and then have the exact opposite, an accurate statue in the backfield that just tries to pick apart the defense instead of making plays with legs. At least with Lance, they're learning the same playbook. He can learn from Cam, even if Cam doesn't want to be a mentor, so to speak. Just learning from what he does to command the locker, I think would be beneficial. So I agree with you, Broncos, but I think Patriots might be a good 1B. Real quick,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring these guys up only because I read today that for some reason Kellen Mond is rumored to be a first-round pick, and I think that's just the fake news cycle. But if he's being rumored there, Kyle Trask has got to be rumored there as well. I think they're the next tier, and I was always kind of thinking of the 2nd or 3rd round picks. they're more developmental. But take one of them and tell me where you'd like to see him end up and where he might be able to be a dynasty asset and how soon.
Yeah, I mean, I would personally be surprised to see either of them end up in the first round. From my point of view, they really are both developmental projects. Anytime that's the case, you've got to circle the teams that are probably going to be asking themselves the quarterback question in the nearer term. In terms of teams that are slotted there, maybe you see Tampa Bay consider it. I would doubt it, just given that they managed to bring back all 22 from their title team. I think they want to try to get better in the immediate term as opposed to building for the future. But if we're talking about the likelihood of them taking a quarterback in round 2, round 3, round beyond, I think they're as good a landing spot as any. I also look at a team like Atlanta. Depending on who's there at 4, I wouldn't be surprised to see them move out of that spot and potentially look to move out of the first round altogether, and look at either Trask or Mond as their quarterback in waiting. Um, so those are the teams that really do kind of jump off the page as looking for that long term answer that's going to need some development, that's going to sit behind their current quarterback for a while. Um, you know, I wouldn't do it, but potentially Minnesota as well. There in the second round could look for their answer behind Kirk Cousins. So those are the spots that really come to mind for me.
And I'll throw in a couple more teams, and I'll just kind of lump both of these QBs together. But I think the one would be Chicago Bears, because I think you'd be starting sooner rather than later. It's not going to take long for the Chicago fan base to be calling for the head of Andy Dalton or Nick Foles. So either one lands there, they could be getting a look towards the middle to the end of the season. And then the other one, if you're actually wanting to sit and learn, no better person maybe to do it from than the Harvard man himself, Ryan Fitzpatrick. So
The babysitter.
the Washington, the Washington football team, that's their name. They don't even have a nickname yet. Those whatever. That would be a good spot to sit back. I could see someone like Kellen Mond sitting there for a year learning from him, something like that. But plenty of good spots from that perspective. Let's jump into the running backs real quick here. When we got kind of I would say let's just lump the top 3 together, because I think these are the names I'm hearing, and they're going in random order, just depending on your preference. And I don't think we can really guess the order they'll be taken in the NFL draft. I think we'll be surprised, like we were last year with Clyde Edwards-Helaire being the first running back taken. He was regarded as a top 3-ish, maybe, but for him to go 1, everybody was kind of shocked. So, of course, I'm talking about Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and Javonte Williams. Who is your preference, and then kind of just slot your favorite, and then I'll piggyback off that and take the next one.
Yeah, for me, it's Najee Harris, right? I think it's fair to kind of lump these 3 as the cream of the crop, but for me, Harris is in a category onto his own as the number 1 overall running back coming out of the college ranks this year.
Yeah. And where do you think would be the best spot for him to go then?
Yeah, so I mean the obvious answer is Pittsburgh. They did invest some capital with Anthony McFarland last year, but upon Connor's exit in free agency, they did say fairly clearly that they were going to address the running back position in the draft. And just historically, Pittsburgh has played these sort of things relatively straight up. I don't think it means that we'll see them take him in the first round, but I do think that that's the logical place, just given how vocal they've been on their intent to acquire a running back in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, you called out. I think for all of these, we could say. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't like you said. I don't think the one's going in the first round, but I do think Pittsburgh will either be moving back or trying to get up in the second to get a get aggressive with that position. And Any one of them would be a good spot there. I'm trying to think of maybe some other good ones. I think the one that's standing out to me, and I'm trying to remember here. Oh, let's no, I'm going to save that one. Miami Dolphins, I think, is a good spot. Young team. They've really been building that offensive line. I think that's one of the top landing spots too. They were rumored last year to be all over Jonathan Taylor Swift. They did the unthinkable and stood pat, which paid off for him. And I was all over the Matt Breida hype train, and that failed spectacularly. And I don't even know if he plays for. I think he's on the Bills now or something. He's somewhere relegated to like third string. Rest in peace, Matt. I'm sorry. I believed in you, bud. Miles Gaskin looked good last year, so maybe they stand pat again. But in theory, just a young electric offense with building a solid offensive line and a solid defense, you would think that'd be a good spot for QB, or sorry, for a running back. And I think Travis Etienne, I think, would be a good complement there for the Dolphins. He's probably my two, to be honest. I wouldn't be mad at any of these, but I think just his skill set. I think he really started to increase his pass catching chops as he got old, into his junior senior year there. I really like that for him, which leads us to Javonte Williams. Where do you have him ranked, and what's another spot that we haven't really talked about?
Yeah, so it sounds like we're in lockstep again. He is third on my board. In terms of where he can fit in, there are a few spots. I think the next team that is going to consider a running back is probably the Broncos, but I don't think that he really fits in all that well with Melvin Gordon. I think an ETN probably fits better as the complementary option there in Denver. So I wouldn't see him landing there. And if that's the case, I could see him sliding a pretty good ways into the third round and beyond, right? You would think that with the acquisition of Connors and what they had and Edwards, that Arizona isn't going to be keen on adding another runner. Maybe Chicago gets a little wary of David Montgomery, but even they've added to their running back core this offseason. So I think that it'll likely be a pretty good slip for him specifically. Maybe as we get into the second or into the third round, we can make an argument that the Jets look to bolster their offensive weapons and add him in. They also have a young runner, but Pirine didn't exactly perform up to expectation in the limited run that he got last year. So potentially there with the Jets with Gang Green might be the spot where he ends up landing.
And let's talk about his college teammate, Michael Carter, who's the more speed back, I believe. I have him fourth, and then after that, it gets kind of muddy. If you want to wrap it up with the one you're thinking about, you can. But a couple spots that I think are ideal for any of them, but maybe for someone like Carter, the first probably more realistic, the Atlanta Falcons. Like we talked about earlier, does Mike Davis stay, last the entire season as starter? I think he can be serviceable or be a 1-2 punch. And who better? Mike Davis is built like a bowling ball. If you get Michael Carter in there, the speed portion. That's what they've been lacking the last several years, really, since was it Freeman, their running back, kind of went down the drain. So I think that's a realistic spots for the Falcons. Maybe the top of the third round. We'll start looking there, or maybe like the pipe dream. What I'm thinking of is the Buffalo Bills, and I don't know what picks they have. It's obviously going to be in the back, but they've invested capital in Zach Moss and Devin Singletary the last couple of years. Neither one seems to be panning out. I think you just keep kind of swinging for it in that third or fourth round area until you land a really, really good back, which can be had. And I think Michael Carter fits that mold as well. He can unseat one of them. You get rid of that one, and then you got that 1-2 punch, or all three of them around, because I think both Moss and Singletary were injured last year. So talk a little bit about Carter. Is there anyone else, like a prospect standpoint, you have your eyes on, Eric?
And so Carter might be my favorite of all of the running back prospects relative to where he'll be drafted, right? I think he presents a lot of value. Specifically, when I was talking about the Broncos earlier, that's where I would absolutely love to see him land, right? A younger, more agile, better visioned version of Philip Lindsay, paired up with an aging Melvin Gordon. I think we could see him, not only start out with a considerable third down role, but eat more and more into that workload as the season went on. So that would absolutely be my ideal landing spot. And I think the point that really jumps off the page is exactly the one you were illustrating with the Bills a moment ago. The the position itself, its value is so deflated that waiting into the late second, into the third, into the fourth round, there are some premier talents, and I think you're going to see teams just continue to go back into the well until they catch lightning in the bottle at the running back spot.
All right, let's move to some wide receivers here real quick. We're right on an hour, so we'll probably be going like an hour and 15. Hopefully, everyone can hang in for just a little bit longer. We got a lot of wide receivers here, so we'll try to move through them quickly. But I think same thing as the running backs. There's I think three that just stand out that are blue chip, and everyone will have their opinion. But it goes Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and then Jalen Waddle. Um, Eric, which one's your favorite? I probably can guess, but where do you think he should be going in the draft? Where's his ideal landing spot?
Yeah, so my favorite is Chase. I think he's the most complete wide receiver coming out of the college ranks this year. Um, uh, Oddly enough, I actually think that Waddle is going to be the first wide receiver off the board. And
The Raiders aren't drafting up there. They can't do this.
yeah, right. Just whoever is going to put the premium on speed, right? It feels as though we saw it last year with Ruggs and with the Raiders. We've seen it with players like Tyreek Hill. There is this premium that's put on those field stretching speedsters. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Waddle go early. Specifically if I'm listening to the logical side of my mind, Chase going to Miami at 6 certainly feels like it makes a whole lot of
So
sense.
you think the Bengals would pass up on the chance to reunite Burrows with such a prolific wide receiver?
I do, and I think this goes into the debate that we've had from weeks past, right? I am incredibly bullish on T. Higgins. I'm also a very big Boyd supporter. I think that front office looks at those weapons as being sufficient, if not premier, and they look at their rookie quarterback getting injured in his first season and are going to put that premium on protecting him and scoop up Sewell.
Yeah, I think getting a tackle is the right move. And just real quick, let me pull up there. You're basically Jamar Chase is averaging out. That was the overall rank. That doesn't make sense. But he is the 24th. Let me see if that comes up. He's coming up as the 23rd running back, kind of slated to end, but right after Ayuk, Deontay Johnson, Kenny Galladay, right before Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster. I guess this seems right. I guess it always depends where he goes, but the way he showed out, I mean, you're gonna have to pay up. I'd rather have him than Johnson and Ayuk. Maybe Galladay, Mike Evans. Do you think you could just say he's getting a little bit older? If Tom Brady leaves, he might not be there. So yeah, you might be having to get up in the like top 15 ish to get Jamal Chase. So yeah, Jamar, I think that's about right. And I think the ideal would be Burrow, but like you, I don't know if that's going to happen. So let's jump to the next one here. Let's go with Devonta Smith, and I don't know if it's ideal, but most likely he's going to be targeted by the Lions at 7. They just don't have anybody there, but maybe they take Waddle as well. But I do think the Lions take one. It's not necessarily ideal. So what I will then talk about, it's realistic. Carolina Panthers at 8. They lost Curtis Samuel. Their offensive coordinator Joe Brady is from the SEC, so if somehow Chase was there, that they could pair it. But he's going to be obviously familiar with Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle as well from the SEC days, and so there's this idea that just take the best player at 8. It could be feasible for the Panthers to do that and just have another, awesome 3 wide receivers just tear it up. So I think that would be somewhat ideal. That's realistic. Eric, what are maybe some other landing spots for either of those guys that you think?
Yeah, on the whole, I think we see two of these guys go back to back at 6 and 7 to Miami and to Detroit. From there, it's hard to say. I see the ties with the coaching staff and the SEC there in Carolina. The next place that really jumps off the page for me is down at 12, where the Eagles just traded back to. Yes, they drafted Rager last year, right before Justin Jefferson went, and right before the entire Minnesota front office did backflips when they saw that he was available to him.
Started laughing. Yep.
So I do think that Philadelphia is going to want another crack at this one, and they're going to try to get it right this time. So I think any of these three stand to contribute in a considerable way in year one. So I would be surprised if any of them make it past 12
And
in that Eagle spot.
what a cool video, just as a quick aside. I mean, I wish we could get more like kind of behind the scenes insights from these teams. Or I was thinking about it earlier today, like a GM should be keeping a journal of all of the draft day drama that goes down and then like write his biography about it. Cause I thought, to me, a football nerd would be very interested to see that. But yeah, seeing the Minnesota Vikings basically sneering and chuckling when they were talking about, okay, it looks like we're definitely going to get a cornerback. And then they're like, wait, the Eagles took who? We can still get Jefferson. Yeah. Hand in the card. And they're like, oh, sorry, wait.
On the phone
Yeah, he's like, I already have it. I already handed in the card. There's no thought here. Yeah, I mean, that's just awesome. I love to see that stuff, and especially, like seeing like the Bears high fiving when they traded to get Trubinsky or something. I would just love to see that, the good and the bad and the ugly. But real quick, Smith they have as the 35th best receiver, kind of slated behind Beckham and Lockett. Ooh, that could be a little aggressive. Waddle's all the way down at 46. He's kind of lumped in with some of the other rookie ones here. And I'll talk. I had a whole bunch listed here. So we have Bateman, Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore, Terrence Marshall. I'm sure I'm missing a couple. Tony from Florida, all rumored to maybe even make it into the first round. I just had a list. Someone I thought the surprise. Was it the Eagles? Maybe that's where you. I do think I don't know if the top 3 any of them fall, but I do think the Eagles either trade back again or they take perhaps their pick of the 4th best wide receiver there, and so maybe a Bateman or Elijah Moore. I have them both. I have rated similarly, but I think. That could be a spot. Now, I don't know if it's ideal with Jalen Hurts being unproven and more of a running quarterback. Might not be the best spot there. Maybe right after it, the LA Chargers. You're married to Justin Herbert for the next 4 or 5 years. Keenan Allen's a great possession receiver over the middle. They lost their tight end, Mike Williams. I think they gave him his 5th-year option, but he hasn't panned out like a first-round pick should. So I think that might be a really good landing spot to be married to what we think might be an elite fantasy contributor.
Yeah, I think who goes next largely depends on which team we're talking about, right? If we're talking about the Chargers, it's probably more likely to be a Bateman, just given his frame and how he profiles. They're likely looking for an answer to replace Mike Williams, right? On the other side of the coin, some of these smaller burner types. Rondell Moore, Tooney, the kid out of Mississippi, Elijah Moore. These guys that can move across the field, that can use their speed and their athleticism to get open. These are the types that I could see Green Bay trying to get it right with and go back to in the first round to pair up with Devonta Adams. So for me, it really depends on which teams are looking to fill that spot in terms of who's going to go next, right? Elijah Moore is 7, 8, 9, 10 on some people's board, but if he lasts all the way to where the Packers are picking, I could totally see him being the fourth wide receiver drafted on next Thursday.
Yeah, and all these wide receivers, I'm just going to kind of lump them together, but they can all kind of be had around the 40 spot through like 50 to 60. So you're really looking at kind of like high end wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. Ish range, and I think they're worth the gamble there. And like I said, I think ideal. This is going to flip by next week. And I said I wasn't going to do it, but really the ideal landing spot is probably the 6th or 7th wide receiver who could fall to the Kansas City Chiefs if they're so inclined to get a wide receiver. Because I don't think they're in love with Mecole Hardman. One of them could find their way onto the Chiefs roster, even in the second round. Someone could fall, and everyone's going to do backflips, and that person's going to go from rank 60th up to rank 30th, just like that, just by being tied to that offense. And maybe that's not a bad idea. Backfired with CEH, but I'd bet on Mahomes and that offense any day. So, did I miss anyone else, Eric? Anyone you just really want to talk about?
No, I really think that's those are kind of the tiers, right? The only thing that I'll add from the dynasty perspective is this is where I like to get aggressive, and I like to stack up and acquire as many of these assets as possible. Because specifically with the wide receiver position, we have seen these guys come in almost regardless of where they've been drafted, at least in the first 3 rounds, and make immediate and considerable contribution from day one, right? So I want as many of those upside guys on the back end of my roster as possible.
All right, let's go to tight ends, and maybe it's just singular tight end because just from a prospect rank setting, there's only one clear-cut startable dynasty tight end right off the bat, which is rare to begin with. If there's anyone else you want to just sprinkle in as maybe some stashes, go for it. But Kyle Pitts, rumored to maybe go all the way at 4 to the Falcons. Seems like an okay landing spot. We've talked about these teams, so I won't rehash it, Eric. But if the Bengals didn't want to go tackle, and they said, we are, and I agree with you. I think Boyd, T. Higgins, that's a good foundation, a good core. You don't need another wide receiver. I don't care if it was, Burrow's boy from the Bayou. But the Bengals could be a great spot. And get that tight and be the pass catcher there. If not him, I don't know if he could make it all the way down. But once again, the Chargers being tied, I just tied to the 2 rookie phenom QBs from last year. But in LA, they've always been really good at scheming Hunter Henry. Herbert had a connection with Hunter Henry last year. Now he's gone. There's a lot of targets there. If he could somehow make it, I think the hype's too big for him to get that far down. But if the Falcons passed on, maybe the Bengals will decide, hey, this is the game changer.
Yeah, your first point is spot on, right? It's Pitts, and then it's everybody else. In terms of where he's going to land, I would be absolutely shocked if he makes it, if he falls outside of the top 10. He looks like a generational talent at the position, and one who's rare for the position, who can contribute in a meaningful way at the NFL level from day one, right? So I think Atlanta makes a lot of sense. I think it's really going to depend on what happens specifically with the 49ers and which quarterback they take at 3. They don't like Mac Jones, who's there as an example. I could see Atlanta taking Pitts. I would be surprised if Cincinnati took him, just given how much the indication out there is that they are looking and locked in on Sewell. Maybe they try to get tricky and get Miami to move up a spot for him. But really, as we look at kind of the back half of this top 10, there are so many spots where he can fit in nicely, right? Carolina, if they're looking to add to their offensive weapons, he could immediately be arguably the best tight end in the division from day one, and really take their offense to another level. I could absolutely see Jerry Jones just going crazy and adding him at 10, right? I could also see a number of the teams here in these teen spots trade up to inside that top 10 to pick him, just given how strong he profiles heading into the draft.
Yeah, and from the Dynasty Pros rankings, they have him slot in. You basically have to take him as the 8th tight end in Dynasty leagues to get him, but right behind Hawkinson, Fant, Goddard, before Gesicki, Irv Smith, Hunter Henry, Jonnu. Um, I don't know. I think if you want him, I'd probably get him over Fant, depending on if they get another QB. Hawkinson, I can make an argument to take the leap there. I mean, you might have to go top 5 to get Kyle Pitts, especially depending on where he goes. But I think Hawkinson there at 5, there's a lot of fleas on him and Fant too. They haven't done anything to blow my skirt up in the first 2 years they've been there. Now they're in QB purgatory, at least for the time being. So maybe Kyle Pitts has to be your Dynasty 5 tight end there. Am I crazy?
No, I mean, almost certainly in the dynasty game, if you want Kyle Pitts, you're going to have to be willing to invest in him as a top 5 tight end, right? The the market is one in the dynasty world where people are viewing him as a 21-year-old Travis Kelce, and if you look at where Travis Kelce is being drafted in the overall rankings, if you made him 21 years old, people would
Yep.
potentially consider him as
Good
a top
point.
3 asset, right? So to look at just how much hype and rightfully so, in my estimation, there is around Kyle Pitts, you have to be willing to let go of that draft capital if you want to try to acquire him. If you're hoping he's there at 6 or at 7, you're going to find yourself out in the rain, in my estimation.
Are there any other tight ends you wanted to touch on? I know there's I don't even know how to pronounce his name. The Penn State Freiermuth or something like that.
Yeah, Fryermuth.
Frymuth. There's a Miami tight end. I mean, they're going in like the 3rd, 4th round at best. I think we talked about last time. Tight ends take the longest time to develop. I think they're just kind of stashes. I can pull up kind of in their range they are. But are there any other ones you just really wanted to touch upon?
I don't think there's really any other that are worthy of a deep analysis, right? I do think that it is Pitts, it is Fryermuth, as sort of the 2 most viable for dynasty consideration. Everyone else is really a dart throw, and even saying those 2 guys in the same breath is a disservice to Pitts. There's such a wide gulf between Kyle Pitts and everybody else in this draft class.
Yeah, and Freiermuth is slot in at 28, and Brevin Jordan, the Miami tight end, is like at 30. And basically, you would be drafting them around like what they have it as is a Rob Gronkowski, a Chris Herndon, Gerald Everett, Dawson Knox. I'm just going to stop talking there because I would rather just stash one of these guys and hope they pan out. Basically, I mean, at 19 is a Tyler Higbee, 18 is a Zach Ertz, Hayden Hurst is at 17. I guess Cole Kmet at 16. That's I guess where you probably would draw the line where you start doing it. But I would probably treat them both as top 25, conservatively, maybe even top 20 assets, just for the unknown. But this is before the draft. Who knows where they go? And then maybe we think they're, it's like Harrison Bryant last year went to Cleveland and was the 3rd string tight end to begin. You're just like, what the heck? So who knows? A lot of things can change there. But Eric, we went over, but not by too much here on this Thursday night. Thanks for being flexible again. Anything else you want to touch about from the tight end position, from the NFL draft? Any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as we switch over to our wrap and to our tweet of the week,
Oh, you have a tweet.
I'll
Okay.
offer up some tweets of the week, and that this is arguably my favorite time of year on fantasy football Twitter, and that is Scott Fishbowl invite season. Just how delighted, how engaged, how supportive everyone is of each other getting those emails, watching my friends and colleagues scream like preteen girls at a boy band concert as they open their email. It's one of the more lighthearted and engaging parts of this community, and so I always love watching this unfold. Scott has hinted at another wave coming out tomorrow, so if you wanna watch it yourself, search hashtag SFB11, and you'll see people posting their screenshots and thanking the academy, and it's just a ton of fun, and all of that energy and excitement is centered around doing really good work for kids. Fantasy Cares is the organization that the Scott Fishbowl is supporting, and every year they basically go and empty out all of the toys and clothes at a Toys R Us or a Target and hook up some kids in need. So, really cool to see just how much good this community can do, and just how much excitement this event in particular manages to drum up.
Well, I don't think we need to say anything else, so we should probably wrap it up. But I'll agree with you there. I mean, if you don't know, check out. I think it's this it's scottfishbowl.com. But yeah, just type in Scott Fishbowl. You'll see that it's like 10,000, I think, maybe a fantasy football league. A lot of it goes to charity, a lot of good work, and so. Even though you might not think you have a chance in hell of winning this thing, just remember it's for the kids, it's for fun, and like you said, what's entertaining sometimes is there's going to be people like the ESPN people like Matthew Berry's, all these people you've heard about in the space. They're going to be in these leagues, and I've seen screenshots of someone with like Matthew Berry talking trash to him because he sent what they thought was a shitty trade offer. And obviously, all
Yeah,
in good fun, but yeah, you never know who you're going to get paired with. Maybe you'll get paired with us and be completely disappointed. I apologize in advance for that. Who knows? But maybe you'll get someone cool like Mike Clay, Matthew Berry, or someone like that. But with that, I think that's it. And hopefully you aren't stuck with us. But thanks for being stuck with us this Thursday night. I guess next time, probably in 2 weeks or so, we'll do a post-draft breakdown because everything we said today will be rendered moot. We'll have all these crazy positions and these rankings when they come out. I'll try to screen grab them actually tonight so I can see how quickly how they've adjusted just based upon where people go. So thanks again, everybody. Always check us out. Eric at Fantasy Nav on Twitter, myself at Not Duck Hodges, then all our work at goingfor2.com. Eric, thanks again, buddy.
thanks, guys.